The US dollar has lost almost all of its value since 1913. That sounds extreme, like exaggeration or fear-mongering, but the math makes it very real. We are not saying your dollar bill disappeared or stopped being accepted. We are talking about purchasing power, what $1 can actually buy in the real world. In 1913, money went much further. Groceries were cheap, rent was low, and everyday goods cost a fraction of what they do today. That same dollar today buys only a few cents worth of goods compared to back then. That is where the idea that the dollar lost about 99% of its value comes from. According to official inflation data, prices today are more than 30 times higher than they were in 1913. In simple terms, it now takes over $30 to buy what $1 bought back then. This did not happen because of one disaster or one bad decision. It happened slowly and quietly through compounding inflation. 2 or 3% inflation does not feel dangerous in a single year. Most people barely notice it and simply adjust. But when that same inflation compounds over decades, the effect becomes massive. Over a century, it completely erodes purchasing power. This is why people feel like they are working harder but getting nowhere. The numbers in your bank account go up, but what those numbers can buy goes down. For much of the early 20th century, the dollar was tied to gold. That link acted as a natural limit on how much money could be created. That changed over time, especially during wars and economic crises. Governments needed flexibility, and strict limits became harder to maintain. The most important shift came in 1971. That was the moment the United States ended the dollar's direct link to gold. From that point on, the dollar became fully fiat money. It was no longer backed by a physical asset. Instead, it was backed by trust in the government, the legal system, and the requirement to pay taxes in dollars. The system continued to work, but the rules had changed. Fiat money allows governments to respond quickly during emergencies. It gives policymakers tools they did not have before. But it also makes it easier to create money over long periods of time. When more money is created faster than goods and services, prices rise. This is not theory. You feel it every time you buy gas, shop for food, or see rent increase. Wages often rise, but they rarely rise fast enough. That gap between income growth and price growth is where purchasing power is lost. Savings held in cash slowly lose value as well. Even when nothing feels wrong, inflation is quietly doing its work. This is why inflation is often called a hidden tax. It does not show up on a bill, but it affects nearly everyone. Up to this point, the story has been about how the dollar lost value over time. What matters next is what that loss actually means for people today. Because once you understand how this happened, the real question becomes what happens next, and how people respond to it. Once you understand how the dollar lost value, the next question is what that actually means for everyday people. Because this story is not just about history, it is about behavior. When purchasing power falls, people are forced to adapt. Some do it consciously, others do it without realizing it. One of the first places this shows up is savings. Money sitting cash slowly loses value over time, even when it feels safe and stable. This is why older generations were obsessed with earning interest. They understood that money needed to grow just to stand still. Debt behaves differently in an inflationary system. Over time, inflation makes existing debt easier to pay back in real terms, assuming income keeps up. That is one reason governments can carry massive debt loads. Inflation quietly reduces the real burden, even if the numbers look bigger. But for individuals, this only works if wages rise. When income lags behind inflation, debt becomes heavier instead of lighter. This pattern has repeated throughout history. It is not unique to the United States or the dollar. Other currencies have followed the same path. Over long periods, most fiat currencies lose purchasing power through inflation. The difference is in the speed, not the direction. Some currencies erode slowly, others collapse quickly. The US dollar has eroded slowly. That slow erosion is why it feels invisible until you zoom out over decades. This is also why people argue about the system. Some see stability compared to worse alternatives, while others see a quiet transfer of value over time. Both views can exist at once. The system works, but it is not neutral. Those who understand inflation tend to structure their lives differently. They think in terms of real value, not just dollar amounts. They pay attention to how fast prices are rising. They compare that to how fast their income is growing. They avoid leaving all their wealth sitting still for long periods. Not because cash is evil, but because time is not kind to it. This does not mean everyone needs to become a trader or take extreme risks. It means understanding the environment you are operating in. Inflation is not an emergency siren. It is background pressure. Over short periods, it feels manageable. Over long periods, it reshapes behavior, policy, and wealth. This is why debates about money never really end. They are debates about fairness, control, and who absorbs the cost of time. The dollar losing 99% of its purchasing power is not a failure of one generation. It is the result of a system running for over a century. Understanding that does not mean rejecting the system. It means navigating it with your eyes open. History shows that people who ignore inflation fall behind quietly. People who understand it make better long-term decisions. This is not about fear or predicting collapse. It is about awareness. Because the biggest cost of inflation is not what you lose in a single year. It is what you lose by not accounting for it over a lifetime. That is the real lesson behind how the dollar lost 99% of its value. That was the breakdown. If you found this useful, like and subscribe, and tell us what topic you want broken down next. We build these episodes around your questions. Stay curious and keep learning.